This is Channel 6 News. I'm Jeannie Lurchin, along with Paul Henneke, with a look at the top stories for this week. Recently, the school board invited community and business leaders to meet the 4 finalists vying for the position of school superintendent. The candidates are Mr. Ted Gardella, a former superintendent from Howell Public Schools, Dr. Nancy Campbell, who is an administrator from Berkeley Community Schools, Dr. Lowell Holtz, recently retired from a school district in Wisconsin, and the final candidate is Mr. George Sasson, superintendent of Clintondale Schools, right here in Macomb County. The candidates toured our area and ended the day with a community forum held at the Retzi. On Monday, August 24th, protesters were out in force in front of the Retzi prior to the school board meeting. The protesters have been picketing all over town for the past 2 weeks, trying to gather public support against privatizing their jobs, as the board continues to wrestle with budget cuts. We talked with some of the protesters before the meeting.
Well, 70% of our group are residents here in Romeo, most of which will be leaving the area with their children because they will not be able to afford to stay here. And the children of the AFSCME families represent almost $1 million in revenue for this school district. So we can't believe that they have come to a place where they're even considering doing this to this community.
In terms of the privatization, I think it's shameful of what's going on. There's been no proof that privatization has worked. There's many, many examples, in fact, that has backfired on the districts who have tried it. You know, a school board is supposed to bring a community together. The staff, the people who live here. And what this will do will tear it apart. And I think it's working against what the school board's supposed to stand for.
I'm diametrically opposed to this. I have no children in the system anymore, but I do have 2 young children that did very well in Romeo schools. I think this is nothing more than another ripoff of the taxpayer, giving public money to private companies, and at the same time accomplishing the lowering of standard of living and quality of life for the residents of Romeo that work in the schools. I think it's despicable. Notice it's being done in the summer, so it's almost behind a veil when these things are being done. And my understanding at this point, to illustrate the diabolical nature of this board, is that these jobs are already posted on Michigan Jobs Works, so the contract's already been awarded before the meeting even takes place. That smells of insider dealing and cronyism. And as a taxpayer in this community, I'm absolutely sickened by this type of approach. And these are good people that have families that participate in this community. And I think what's being done by a very small select group of people does not represent the interests of this community, and certainly not the students. Because the reality is, what is the board doing? Taking out accountability out of the system, responsibility out of the system, because they'll simply say, as all of you know that have cable TV, that have tried to get adjustment on your rates, they're going to say, it's not our fault, that's what the contract says. So they do not face the responsibility that they were elected to execute on. And again, as a taxpayer, not a Romeo School employee, I'm simply a taxpayer that is absolutely sickened by this attempt by this board.
The meeting began in its usual format. However, public comment lasted over 2.5 hours, giving 32 citizens and employees an opportunity to voice their concerns on the resolution calling for privatizing or outsourcing custodial services. The audience at times became vocal, and several times during the meeting, President Dale Chesney asked for order.
We understand, so.
I will, Mr. Chesney. You again should not stay here till November. You need to leave immediately. Now, let me talk to you and the audience about the 4 candidates.
You need to, excuse me, you need to
address. I can't talk to you people, I'm sorry.
Ma'am, please don't use it as a toy. This is a,
believe me, I have better toys than this.
Okay. You know, please respect the fact that this is a business meeting.
I respect everyone in this audience.
Ma'am.
Mr. Chesney.
Please do not challenge the situation.
I'm not challenging.
Direct your feedback to me.
I am. If you
do
would
it in a
just be
respectful way
quiet
if
for a
at all
moment.
possible. Please don't, because we'll have to stop it at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The board went into closed session and after an hour came back to resolve the issue with the following motion.
Board resolution to reduce staff due to failure to achieve necessary reduction in costs through labor negotiations resulting in outsourcing. Whereas the Board of Education has the fiduciary responsibility to be an effective steward of the district's financial resources to ensure that it can provide the highest quality education program possible, and whereas in the face of steadily rising costs and reduced state aid payments that have failed to keep us with such costs, and the failure to achieve a necessary reduction in costs through labor negotiations, the board has determined outsourcing certain services and a reduction in staff is necessary in order to preserve the district's financial stability. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board hereby authorizes the superintendent to reduce staff and lay off the following individuals and/or positions and take whatever action is otherwise necessary to effectuate these layoffs as soon as practical, unless by Thursday, August 27th, 2009 at noon, the superintendent has entered into a tentative agreement for a one-year period with the ASME bargaining group that results in a savings of $850,000 as determined by administration. Do we have support for this motion?
Support.
All right. And I can just finish to read this. The custodial and other staff position members whose services will no longer be needed due to the fact that such services will be performed in the future by the vendor chosen by the board action earlier in today's meeting. So these are linked, but they're both linked on that same condition of August 27th.
John Rutledge, REA president, told us the teachers union has just begun the formal bargaining process and have met with the administration team. The next bargaining sessions are scheduled for August 27th and September 10th. There were many dedications around the community last week. In Bruce Township, the fire department was honored with a mobile Ansel fire extinguisher monument. Then Supervisor Jim Ticcanelli unveiled a memorial to the firefighters. This memorial was sculpted by Township resident Ken Melton to honor his two deceased sons, Kenneth and Richard. Mr. Melton had a special idea in mind when he made this sculpture, and we'll let Jim Ticcanelli tell the story.
But it's not a secret, it's not a coincidence that it has a white helmet on it with the number 1 on it. The reason that is because, Floyd, come over here. No, you can't keep the sheet. This is dedicated to Chief Floyd Shotwell. It's not...
Guys were making jokes of this when they had that box out here that they said, Chief, is that a statue of you? And I said, no, it's too tall, okay? So I knew it wasn't me, but I didn't realize it's on a pedestal. Okay, thank you very much for coming, and Mrs. Melton, you and your husband, I really appreciate it. The guys appreciate it. Thank you. If it wasn't for these guys, people, we wouldn't be anything. It's not me. It's these guys right here. And I have to thank my family and my wife for putting up with all the missed meals and everything being left in restaurants or anything else. So, okay, thank you very much.
And right here in Channel 6's front yard, a bench was dedicated to two of our original board members, Gary Schucke and Gordon Doris. Many friends and fellow workers came out to honor them for their years of service to Channel 6 and to the community. The Washington Township Fire Department is in the process of finding a new location for Station 1 since the community has outgrown the current station.
I'm going to share with you some of the reasons that we need to move our location and move our fire department operations into the new station. As you'll see in the pictures today, our station is not adequate at this time. The township grew much larger than it was when the station was built in the 50s, and we basically, the township's outgrown the department. The trucks that you see behind me and in the other pictures are much larger than they were when the station was built in the 1950s. So in some cases we have literally inches to clear the apparatus on the sides or on the top to get it in the bay.